And I've now unmuted, so I'll start again. Good morning, I'm Steve Stewart. I chair the Professional and Business Services Board at the Liverpool City Region LEP. And I'd like to welcome you all today to this webinar, which is brought to you by the Growth Platform and the University of Liverpool Management School. Thank you for joining us this morning. We've had over 130 people register, and so far we're at about 75 of them actually participating, which demonstrates the strong interest there is. We have three excellent panelists to share their thinking on the subject matter, which will have a direct impact on the recovery of the Liverpool City Region economy. We will be recording the webinar this morning, and it will be available afterwards on the Growth Platform YouTube channel. And you do not need to subscribe, it's free of charge. I am now hoping to introduce a good friend of mine, Anne Donnelly from the University of Liverpool Management School, who is going to say
Hi, Steve.
A few words of welcome. Anne?
Hiya, Steve. Thanks very much. It's really just a very, very quick welcome from me on behalf of the Management School. At the Management School, we host an event annually with our friends at the Growth Platform, using it to showcase some of the latest thinking and research from the school and how it can have a positive impact in the Liverpool City region. This year is no different, as we'll be hearing from my colleague Gavin Brown, who I'm confident, absolutely confident, will impress you with all his knowledge and positivity. In normal times, as I tend to refer to pre-COVID, we also use this event to showcase the wonderful campus we're incredibly fortunate to have at the university, and the excellent teaching and learning facilities for all our student learners. Like many, I miss that physical space very often. Welcoming you to a Zoom call is clearly not quite the same, though of course I extend that virtual welcome. As has regularly been reported in the media, our current cohort of students will graduate in exceptionally uncertain times. So my one ask of all our friends on this call today across the region is, if you are able to offer a summer internship, student project, year in industry placement, graduate job, student project, I could go on, that you think would be appropriate for one of our students, please do let me know, and I will post our email address into the chat now. For now, though, I will pass back to Steve and all our panelists. I hope you enjoy the event. Thanks, Anne.
Thank you, Anne. We're now going to hear from each of the panelists, and the way this works is I will introduce them. They will then speak for around 6 or 7 minutes each, and at the end of the three presentations, we will have a panel discussion where you, the audience, will have a chance to pose questions to the panel. So please use the Q&A facility that comes along with the kit, or the chat function, which will also work on this basis. So over to our first speaker, and I'm absolutely delighted today to welcome Mark Bousfield. And thank you, Mark, for coming, because I know how busy you are. Mark is the Director of Commercial Development and Investment at Liverpool's Combined Authority. He is actively working to create a globally competitive, environmentally responsible and socially inclusive economy in the Liverpool City region. Today, we're going to hear from him with some strands around the Build Back Better recovery strategy for the City region. So without further ado, let's hand over to Mark Bousfield.
Thanks very much, my friend, and thank you also for stealing my opening lines. Great, guys. So you know who I am. What I do is I have the privilege professionally of taking all the money we receive from government for devolution, for investment in economic development across the city region, and investing it in productive projects, be it skills projects, be it infrastructure projects, be it land and property or housing projects. That's what I have the privilege of doing. And I work for the Liverpool City Region Combined Authority now. I'm going to go into about a minute's detail about what that organisation is and what it's for, and then we'll start talking about the economy. So the Combined Authority is the product of George Osborne's devolution drive. If you remember back to the heady days of the coalition government, if you did a deal with the Treasury about devolution, you got more local powers, an elected metro mayor, and funding that you could administer locally, along the hypothesis that decisions made locally would be better decisions for the economy. So we have a combined authority, we have devolved money to invest locally, and we have a metro mayor called Steve Rotherham. Steve Rotherham's vision for our economy is about a globally competitive, environmentally responsible, and socially inclusive city region. Great. We all want to live in a globally competitive, environmentally responsible, socially inclusive place. That's kind of obvious. But why is it still relevant if we've been effectively shut down for the last 10 months, almost 12 months now, and we've been pumping money into the economy in totally unsustainable ways, at a rate that is also totally unprecedented? It's still relevant because our long-term strategy for the city region is based on actual known strengths. And so even though you've had this 12-month hiatus, the things we're going to be good at in the 2020s are the things that we were going to be good at from 2019, right? So infectious diseases control, high performance computing, advanced manufacturing, culture and the visitor economy. These are things that in the long term we're going to be good at. And I'm sure that Jenny will be able to come in and talk about her client base and how they align with the strengths of the city region economy. And I want to remind you of the things that we were doing well before COVID. So in the last 10 years, more or less, Liverpool has taken its unemployment rate from 4 or 5% above the national average to just below the national average. We've developed world-leading strengths in the things that I've just mentioned around infectious diseases control, high performance computing. We're doing really, really exciting stuff about health and social care data that you'll see coming from the university very soon. We built a visitor economy that had got taken us from more or less the 20th to 30th most visited city in the UK to the top 5, dead easy. We're going further up that list. And so we were really starting to hum on the things that we were good at. But here's the catch. At the same time, we had an increasing and stubborn group of people who were simply not participating in our economy because they're not healthy mentally or physically, because they look after people who are not healthy mentally or physically, because they don't feel connected to the economy. And so from 2019, we faced this dilemma that a lot of cities face, a lot of Western countries face, which is that most people are doing very well indeed, thank you very much. Some people aren't participating, and that smaller group that aren't participating are dragging down the performance of the economy and the well-being of the place as a whole. And COVID exacerbates that, doesn't it? Because what we know, and I'm sure that you've read, just as I've read about K-shaped recoveries and divided recoveries and et cetera, what we know is we are going to lose nationally tens of thousands of jobs in retail, and particularly retail that hasn't got a good online presence and that will fall away permanently. You know, a local example is if you think about Liverpool 1 and Debenhams closing, or Topshop closing, and or Topman going to ASOS, those stores aren't necessarily going to be replaced physically, are they? But another local example is that my organisation has just given money to 2 management school grads they've got a company called Make Thread that do sustainable single item fashion runs that we're really excited about. And that feels like a model that's more future focused. So we've got thousands of jobs coming out of retail. We've probably got thousands of jobs coming out of the visitor economy in the short term as well, because things will take time to get back to normal. And they tend to be the lesser paid, more fragile jobs. And the big question for our economy, as for other cities in the Western world, as indeed for the government, is how do we replace those jobs? The long-term strategy is really clear, right? We're going to do more science, we're going to do more innovation, we're going to do more high practice, high value engineering, And we have a strategy that we just need to deliver on to do those things. But replacing the jobs we're going to lose in retail and the visitor economy in the short term is a much more entrenched challenge. And it's also much more complex because we depend much more on government and agencies like the Department for Work and Pensions, on the Treasury, etc. And there are many more unknowns, so we don't know what's going to happen as furlough unwinds. It's been delayed several times already. We don't know how the economy is going to perform when that happens. And so it's really difficult to plan both for the short term and for those excluded groups, and much easier to plan actually for the long-term things that we're all going to be great at. My organisation tries, and me personally, we try to be listeners. So I'm just as interested in hearing what you think as I am about talking. So leave you with those questions, and I'll look forward to your thoughts. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Mark. And some real food for thought there. Remember, in about 15 minutes, we'll be opening up the Q&A panel, which Mark's staying around for. So let's get some questions ready for Mark, if you could. It's now my pleasure to introduce Jen Lee. Jen has worked at KPMG for over 19 years and has been office managing partner in Liverpool since 2019. I think she heads a talented and multidisciplinary team of people serving clients across both the public and private sectors. She is responsible for maintaining a well-established and successful audit and tax business, supporting and growing market-leading deals practice, and seeking opportunity to continue the development of the firm's award-winning consultancy team across the City region and beyond. She is a member of KPMG in the UK's Northern Leadership Team, and in her spare time, she's a member of the Local Enterprise Partnership PBS Board. Jen, over to you.
Thank you, Steve, and good morning, everyone. So I'm going to talk to you about the importance of social mobility. And I wanted to start my presentation by making two statements. Having a diverse workforce gives businesses a serious competitive advantage. Companies with more diverse workforces outperform their competitors and achieve greater profits. So, what do I mean by diversity? Diversity in the workplace means that a company's workforce includes people of varying gender, age, religion, race, ethnicity, cultural background, sexual orientation, languages, education, and abilities. Now, I'm an accountant. I like facts and figures. And the business case for inclusive and diverse businesses is really clear. Companies with greater diversity in every sense of the word are 70% more likely to capture a new market, have 19% higher innovation revenues, enjoy greater customer satisfaction and better market position, and outperform non-diverse teams by 35%. So this isn't just a nice to have for businesses, it's an absolute necessity. And if your team is truly diverse, then the team will be able to think more broadly, analyse facts better, be more innovative, and there's a huge amount of evidence to support this. So creating a more diverse workplace helps all members of our teams to develop and grow, but as well as having diverse teams, every organisation should also have inclusive practices so that everyone feels they belong and that their voices can be heard. And by helping to make societies more equitable, customer bases grow, operating environments become more stable, and there's a greater trust between customers and stakeholders. Paying fair wages and eliminating the gender pay gap is also crucial to boost social mobility, and every business in the City region has a role to play. Now, if you've heard my story before, you'll know that I'm from one of the most deprived areas of the city, Kensington. I went to the local primary school and state secondary school. I had no connections to the business world, no networks, no mentors, and there is a huge inequality that lies at the heart of our education system. There are some really high-performing young people at low-attaining schools who are just not being supported. I remember at a careers event in school being told that I'd be well suited to a job as an air hostess. Now, that's quite specific, and it's a great job if that's the career you want to pursue. But I think I said I wanted to work in business and travel the world. I had absolutely no one to guide me. I didn't know what careers I could have apart from the ones I've been exposed to in my everyday life. And I chose accountancy by chance, as a friend from university wanted to be an accountant, and that sounded like a good career. So there are really bright people in the Liverpool City region who have an absolute mountain to climb to achieve parity with their more privileged peers. And so the odds are already stacked against them from the start, and we've got to help change that. I was extremely fortunate to be offered a graduate position at KPMG, a firm who believes in fairness and equality, and I've received guidance and support from both male and female mentors throughout my career to get me where I am today. And KPMG has taken a leading role on social mobility for a number of years now, believing it not a matter of fairness, but an economic necessity. And now we're yet to see the full economic and social impact of the pandemic. However, all the evidence so far suggests that the gap between the rich and the poor is widening. The SMC recently issued a report that recommends joined up thinking in Whitehall as part of the economic recovery, as well as the creation of a dedicated social mobility unit to ensure coordination between all departments in the civil service in tackling this crisis. And the report goes on to stress that leading change can't be left to government, or it'll just not happen. Employers, local authorities, schools, universities, and all of us in society have to act with urgency and ambition to create opportunities that are so desperately needed for young people. And the government should make it clear that it will back and invest in those bold commitments. There was also a report entitled COVID-19 and Social Mobility. It was published by LSE's Centre for Economic Performance, and that points out that before the crisis, younger generations were already facing decline in absolute mobility, falling real wages, fewer opportunities, and a stagnant or declining living standards. So now that the crisis has drastically worsened economic and education inequality, young people are less likely to fare better than past generations. They're less likely to climb the income ladder and less likely to full their potential regardless of their background. And there's a genuine concern that these inequalities could become entrenched for some time. The report goes on to call for a number of recommendations, such as the introduction of job guarantees for people who are unemployed for more than 6 to 12 months, a dual approach to upper secondary schools with a credible vocational scheme alongside the current routes, just to name but a few. And whatever actions are taken, it's clear that something needs to change. So what I've just described is based on facts and evidence. And when I was preparing for this presentation last night, I started to feel quite depressed. And I'm a glass half full individual, and I like to find solutions to problems. So this got me thinking, what if the pandemic is a dislocation for the economy? What if this is a big bang moment that could shift the balance of power? What if the pandemic has exposed that remote working allows you to take jobs from anywhere? So we can have social mobility without physical mobility. So people in the Liverpool City region can be exposed to different careers. You know, that could be two extremes. You could work in advertising in London, but from your home office in Liverpool, or more closer to home. If you don't drive and you live on the outskirts of, say, Kirby, you could get a role in Widnes, say, without having to endure a 2-hour commute each way every day, as perhaps hybrid working would mean that you only need to be physically present in the office for maybe 2 days a week. So increased flexibility from employers brings talent mobility. And if I was thinking glass half empty, I'd be thinking that people who are less skilled will be left behind. So as Mark mentioned, thousands of people in retail have lost or may lose their jobs. Yet people in retail have really transferable skills. They're great with customers. They've got empathy, sales skills, and emotional intelligence. And these are all skills that are top of the tick list for employers in the future. So there'll need to be a reskilling, of course, particularly with digital skills, and this will need to be supported by local government. And I was discussing this with a colleague recently, and he gave me a fantastic analogy that's very visual, and it's really stuck with me. So I'd like to share this before I close. If you're losing in a game of Monopoly, and suddenly the ball gets kicked in the air, all the pieces go everywhere, then you're in no worse a position. But what happens is the game starts again, and it's a more equal playing field, and you might just have the opportunity to win. Steve, I'll stop there and hand back to you.
Thanks, Jen. And trust me when I tell you, I know you as a half glass full girl. So you keep it half full. All right. Final speaker, Gavin. Gavin Brown is an associate professor in financial technology at the University of Liverpool Management School. I know because we've had a conversation previously. He's also a member of the Institute of Chartered Accountants in England and Wales, that fine establishment that also boasts members such as myself and Jen Lee. He is the FinTech lead and holds both a bachelor's and MSc in business management, as well as an MBA from the University of Oxford. His research focuses on payment technologies and the future of money, specifically cryptocurrencies and stablecoin pricing. That's enough from me. Over to you, Gavin, and you have more than enough time to fill your slot. Okay, my friend.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Steve. And thank you very much to Carolyn and the Growth Platform as well for inviting me to speak today. I think it's a lovely way to have passed over as well from Jen's fine comments before. That analogy of the Monopoly board, I think, is a very powerful one. And hopefully I can sort of take that and maybe build on it a bit more in the context of looking forward, not just in the context of the Liverpool City region, but also more broadly in terms of what's happening in the world of finance and in particular the world of fintech. So before I begin, I just kind of, I guess the big message I almost wanted to speak to you about first of all was, you know, why does this matter from a Liverpool City region perspective? And as various employers and managers and leaders in different companies and across different sectors, often it's quite probable and possible that people refer to and think about things like fintech and don't really think it applies to them. So one of the things I'm keen to do is kind of dispel that kind of mystery around something like what fintech is, then to think about the forward-looking nature of it and where it might apply to your particular organization. And then primarily as well to give some kind of forecast as to what I see the strengths are in the Liverpool City region, and maybe even to touch on the odd case study or two in terms of some sort of excellent examples that are happening at a local level. So first of all, a lot of people will ask me things like, you know, obviously technology has been with us for many years, but what is it that's so special about fintech at the moment in particular? You know, what kind of technological changes are happening and why is it happening right now? And I guess this distills down to probably 3 or 4 key trends or emerging themes that are coming through in the world of technology. Now, I must sort of caveat here, I'm not a technologist myself. I'm a man of finance. I'm a chartered accountant, as Steve said, similar to Jen and Steve as well. And I've got a history of working in financial markets and funds. However, what I'm interested in is the financialization of these technologies. How do they play out in the world of banking and finance and wealth management and many more things besides? So the first thing and first key theme is this idea of artificial intelligence and big data. The notion that machine learning is allowing us to use things like predictive analytics to better price and actually provide goods and services to our target consumers. This doesn't necessarily mean that it's exclusively just in the world of finance. In fact, most people and most organizations, or indeed particularly large industries, are using these types of predictive tools to better forecast what the needs of their consumers might be, not just today, but in the quarters and years going forward. We've also got a big increase in cryptography, the idea of smart contracts, biometrics, the idea that we're able to put in place infrastructure which is taking a friction out of a lot of the systems that are in place, be that in the world of loss adjusting and insurance underwriting, or maybe just in terms of things like wealth management and proposing financial products which are appropriate for your audience. Distributed computing is also increasing. This is what's commonly referred to as blockchain. Still lots of, I guess you might say, disagreement and discourse around what's the genuine benefit of something like blockchain. Typically, people just tend to think Bitcoin, and that's really the only thing they tend to focus on. But the idea of using blockchain is something that is prevalent in the areas of not just corporations, but also local government and national government as well. For instance, I know the Her Majesty's Land and Registry division is at the moment putting on all title records for land and property onto a publicly available blockchain to allow stakeholders to more quickly verify ownership in the sort of business of conveyancing and other similar things as well. And then finally, we've got a much bigger driver in terms of mobile access and digital proficiency. What does this mean? Well, a lot of this is to do with the ideas of open banking. A lot of the regulation around this is what we know as something called PSD2, which is Payment Services Directive 2. This is the notion that we're able to almost aggregate our financial services that we consume as customers of our banks and various other wealth management agencies, so we can kind of see all things in one place. You know, a dashboard where we can observe things like, for instance, our pension, as well as our mortgage and any credit cards that we might have, as well as our general personal and checking accounts, for instance. So lots of things changing, but I think it's important to recognize that these technologies aren't just particular to the world of finance. Fintech is something that I specialize in, but there's many other areas as well of the broader economy that are being affected by these sorts of technologies. So you may have heard of prop tech, which is in the world of property, insure tech, which is particular to insurance, law tech, which is obviously a big part of also what we research here at the University of Liverpool, and wealth tech, and many others besides. So I think the first big message I've got here is the idea that fintech, or the technology that is behind it, isn't just for financial companies. I do a lot of work with various organizations. I know, for instance, one of the big investment banks in the US, their current biggest recruitment that they employ in terms of graduates is not bankers or risk managers. It's technologists. They define themselves as a technology company, which happens to deploy their core competencies in the world of financial services. Similarly, just last year, the chief executive of Volkswagen, the automobile group, actually said they don't operate in the automobile sector anymore. They define themselves as a technology company who happen to be applying their technological competencies in the fields of automobile and car manufacturing and production. And I would argue that lots of industries are now seeing that tipping point where technology is becoming such a big part of what they do that it's actually a key driver for their successes going forward. So what does this mean for the Liverpool City region, and what does it mean for the broader economy? Well, we are in a situation now, obviously, where we're in a almost like a black swan type event, these low probability, high impact events where, you know, just 10 years ago, many of us saw the financial crisis as the crisis of our generation. And yet we find ourselves just over a decade on in COVID-19, an unpredictable but pervasive and obviously significant downside threat. But with, as Jen said in the previous talk from my fellow panelists, lots of opportunity as well there, which I think is of use when we're thinking about these things and not just focusing on the downside. In terms of what this means, obviously from a financial perspective, I'm thinking about the idea that, you know, quantitative easing, the interest rates being lower than they've ever been, this kind of mantra or philosophy of lower for longer base rates by most central banks globally. We're seeing, for instance, at the moment, the Bank of England consulting on the possibility of negative real interest rates. You know, what does that do for society in terms of negative interest rates, in terms of the debt that they carry and how that debt is particularly serviced? This has implications for individuals in the Liverpool City region, as well as broader corporations and obviously nation states as well. I mean, just to put that into context, if we look back to the previous financial crisis, 07 to 09, the amount of new money that was created to get us out of that situation, that kind of quantitative easing, was $2 trillion globally. Okay, and yet for COVID-19, $2 trillion was the quantitative easing response of just the United States, just for phase one. So that gives us some idea of the magnitude of order more the COVID-19 crisis is relative to the 07-09 crisis that we saw previously. However, it's not all bad news. There's lots of success stories in there as well. Just in Q3 of last year, there was a grateful statistic that I saw, which showed that US tech stocks, okay, so technology companies in the US only, actually were worth more by market capitalization compared to the entirety of all European stock markets. So the idea that technology is becoming more important is being also seen in the creation of these trillion-dollar companies, which have really, for the most part, only existed for sort of a decade or two, and particularly not more than that. So in terms of LCR and what we're thinking about and what I'm thinking about here at the university, first of all, the Liverpool City region is in a great position. I saw a statistic the other day, which was in the UK FinTech State of the Nation report, which said that Liverpool is the largest wealth management centre outside of London, that they have established financial services and a very proactive digital scene. It mentions specialisms in the area of FinTech, life sciences, artificial intelligence, and data management. but that there was a skills gap, and we here at the University of Liverpool are particularly keen to explore that skills gap, and that's why we're launching the new MSc Financial Technology Masters Programme. That's coming online, and we'll be accepting their first cohorts and in September later this year. So I'm very keen now to hand back to Steve. But before I do, I guess my big message is that fintech isn't just for financial companies. Technology is becoming a bigger part of our local economy and also our broader national economy, and that we here in Liverpool, along with the partnerships with the University of Liverpool, are in a fantastic position to exploit those opportunities and also close those skills gaps where we see them. Thank you very much. I'll hand back to Steve.
Thank you, Gavin. Some real food for thought. And I'm sure people will have some questions as the next part of this webinar progresses. We have had one question in already from Maureen Royce, and I'm going to pose that question to Jen Lee, and I think Mark Boutfield may be able to support Jen in the response. But the question is, how do we reach out to socially disadvantaged communities to support their entry into the new game of Monopoly and help them to roll a 6?
And it's a great question, Maureen, because that is one of the key considerations that, you know, government will need to think about, and we as responsible citizens will as well, because there is the piece about making sure that the right infrastructure is in place. So, you know, talking about making sure broadband is accessible to all. I'm a governor in a school, and I know that, you know, there have been laptops which have been distributed to, you know, disadvantaged children, and not just disadvantaged children, just children who haven't got access to, I guess, online learning. But that's just the infrastructure. That's a start, but that's nowhere near enough. There needs to be a real shift in mindset, I think, in terms of we need to upskill the children, but we need to upskill some of those parents as well. So digital learning and the importance of digital needs to be emphasised at school. It needs to be emphasised in communities, using community hubs, using community centres, online learning, this lifelong learning. You know, I guess focused more on the gap between the younger, but actually there's a gap between, you know, people who are already disadvantaged, and how do we retrain them? So lifelong learning, it's a whole host of organisations who need to pull together to make this work. We can't just leave it to the government. And Gavin or Mark, I don't know if you'd have anything to add to that.
I've got a little bit from a combined authority, so from the local public sector's perspective. So we've just done a joint venture with a telecoms operator and a French infrastructure investment group to put best-in-class, future-focused backhaul network across the city region, right? So the pipes and fibres that are sort of the digital equivalent of motorways across the city region, and we're really excited about it. We think, you know, the data usage in Dublin doubles every 9 months. We are the closest English city to Dublin. We should be claiming a lot more of the onshoring of that data than we currently are. So there's a great business case around it. And so what? Because if you can't afford a broadband package, it really doesn't matter what fibre you've got. And so what we're trying to do locally is use the data motorway that we're building and work with registered providers, local authorities, schools, etc., to try and innovate in the ways that you can price and offer connectivity, so the kids that you're talking about, Jenny, can do their homework because they have a really cheap broadband package. It's not really the hardware, it's the innovation and affordability that will make a difference here, and that's what we're working on or trying to work on. It's made difficult actually by European state aid law, because European state aid law prevents you from putting digital infrastructure into urban places that are less well off. So it's much easier to subsidise broadband into Surrey and the home counties than it is into Bootle or Kirby. And I think there's also some regulatory change that could make a big difference there, but that's not one for us at our level.
Oh, thanks, Mark. Some interesting thoughts. Gavin, moving this on to skills, what are the likely fintech skills of the future which employers and education providers within the city region should be thinking about today?
Yeah, thanks for the question there, Steve. I think I read an interesting statistic the other day which said that 80% of jobs which the current primary school age children go on to ultimately have in their future careers do not presently exist. So obviously that's a forecast, but even if it's even slightly higher or slightly lower than it ends up being, it really does show the fact that, you know, myself as an educator and other educators at different levels of the education system, be it primary, secondary, further education or higher education, we're in a kind of difficult situation because we're trying to teach the generation coming through, the kind of millennial and post-millennial generations, using our experiences, which by definition are outdated and are based on the old economy, not the new economy that's coming. So, you know, one of the, I guess, key points I would suggest is that, you know, I've got 4 young children, and already one of them's got a Raspberry Pi, which was given to them by the local authority here in Cheshire, where I live. And they're doing various coding projects at a very elementary level. But, you know, the idea of doing coding was not something that was certainly on my radar through my education, and I'm not sure about fellow panelists, but it's certainly a new thing coming through. So I think embracing those kind of opportunities, the idea of being comfortable with technology is obviously second to none. But also, I think, as Jen was saying before, it's not just a case of infrastructure and having access to, let's say, broadband or laptops or whatever it might be. It's also the inspiration to use these things and pursue these things in a kind of forward-looking manner. But at the same time, you know, I wouldn't want to see, you know, everybody pursuing education to a specialist level just in tech and just in fintech, for example. I mean, there's a statistic this morning on the news, wasn't there? I think UCAS has put a warning out to the education's minister that foreign language study has fallen by over 1/3 at higher education level. You know, that's something that's incredibly important to a forward-thinking and outward-looking economy, either at a national or regional level. So it's a case of, you know, preserving the old, that's important, but also looking forward with the new as well.
Right, thanks, Gavin. We're getting a few more questions in from the audience now, and I think probably this one's directed to Mark Bousfield, but what will be the impact of the UK subsidy policy on investments in the city region? And that came from God.
I know exactly who that came from. Good morning, Pernilla. We don't know, do we, Pernilla? We don't know, because there are 2 things here. There's one about the law and what is allowed in terms of investment into the regions, and there's another about politics and what the government wants to put into the regions. And we haven't got much clarity on either. So I'd send that question back to you, I think.
One for you to think about, Pernilla. Sadly, you can't join the debate, but I'm sure we'll get the answer at some point. Jen, I've got another question for you, but how can local business encourage their staff to get involved and support more diverse communities to access job opportunities and raise aspirations?
Just coming off mute so no one hears my kids in the background. So, like I said earlier, every business has a role to play in this. If you are a business in the city region, you should be supporting your community. And what you need to do is make sure that you are engaging with local schools, and you are providing mentor opportunities, work experience opportunities, and that they are not just for those individuals who have good networks, and that there are opportunities for other more disadvantaged schools to access those opportunities, and that they're fairly advertised. Just repeat the question again to me, Steve, so I can make sure I've picked up all the points, as it was quite a long question.
Apologies. How can business encourage their staff to get involved locally to support more diverse communities to access job opportunities and raise aspirations when hope seems uncertain at the moment? Okay,
yeah, so it is about that engagement and making a commitment and doing what you say you're going to do as well. So if I think about what we do, at KPMG, and that'll maybe give a flavour for what other businesses could get involved in. So we engage with schools, and we do reading with schools, and we do literacy with schools. And these are schools that are not the typical schools that you might expect that KPMG would engage with. And we're really, I guess, doubling our efforts on those as well. So we are sponsored for, well, founding sponsor for National Numeracy Day. We are linked with the Royal Institution, and we do maths masterclasses. We allow our people and actively encourage our people to go back to their schools. So, you know, I've done presentations across various schools in the city region talking about my career path. And I think it is just about making sure that you're doing the right thing, because ultimately that right thing will pay benefits for all businesses.
Thanks, Jen. Another question for they're coming in thick and fast for Mr. Bousfield. They must think you have some cash available to invest, Mark. This one involves the getting back to normal bit, or the monopoly moment. Are we going to kick the board upside down and start again? But Alison Lobb asks the question, and it's one I think that if we get this bit right, that there's a real agent of change here. But are the funds available to businesses to invest in tech to support new ways of working, which will help promote the varied workforce that we think we need for the future?
Thanks, Alison. I've spied your question on the Q&A thing. I think it's a great question, but there's no way I'm answering it alone. So I'll give a short bit, and then we'll have a voice from business and education as well. Yeah, so starting out here is that, yes, of course there are, but there are also company owners and company directors who are motivated in this direction anyway. Like, it's wrong for us to think that all companies will need external motivation to continue a productivity drive or a transformation drive or a right-sizing and growth drive, because that's going to be their bread and butter conversations every day. So that's just the starting point for that. Second thing is, we're doing loads. We're really, really proud of our Future Innovation Fund, which gives relatively small amounts of money to new businesses to start up with business models that are either adapting to or moving from COVID. We're working with MSIF around angel and early stage funding. We're working with Alder Hey Hospital and the university around life ventures. So there's lots of stuff around change and new products and services and new businesses that we're working on really, really actively. But I think we should complement what we're doing on the public sector side with maybe Jenny's view about how KPMG's advice and services is helping businesses to adapt, and then maybe Gavin's view about how technology is coming in to do the same thing.
Yeah, thanks, Mark. And I was just reading all the various questions in the chat there as well. And I think, you know, Alison's point about how do we keep pushing and motivating the businesses in the city region to continue the transformation. As a firm, we are looking at this as a transformational moment. We're looking at how we can change our working practices and actually how we can do so to encourage more flexible working at KPMG, which in theory would mean that more people might apply to us because we may seem more appealing as a place to work. And I think, you know, what you don't want to do is just go back to the old normal, because if you do that, you're missing an opportunity. So I think you've got to take the best of what lockdown has brought and make that work for your business, and that'll be different depending on what sector you're in. You know, whether you are a service business such as KPMG, or if you are a manufacturer, you're going to have different plans. But whatever you do and whatever your plan is, take a moment to make it different and make it better than what it was before. And I wonder if we could ask that question, that people could, I guess, give their experiences in the chat as well about things that they're doing to help build back better.
Well, great idea, because we're not going to have time to go through all the questions. So my commitment to the people who have asked the questions is we will take the questions offline. I promise you, each of the panelists will give their input. We'll summarise them and we'll get the answers back to you as soon as we can after today. and I hope that will serve to give people the responses they're looking for. But I would call upon Gavin, from an academic perspective, what do you see working better in academia moving forward?
Yeah, thanks for the opportunity to speak on that, Steve. I know from my perspective, I'm Director of Studies for the new MSc Financial Technology programme, and the kind of big initiative I want to do, and I know this is something that students are keen on and can also help businesses, is particularly at a postgraduate level, is the idea of the way they do their research. So at the moment, the kind of traditional one is one of getting a data set and doing some analysis and producing what we call a dissertation, which is a significant piece of work at the end of their master's degree. But what I'm keen on is we've also got something called an entrepreneurial dissertation, where we effectively invite a company, let's say they're in the Liverpool City Region, doesn't matter what industry they work in, and who are wrestling with maybe it's a point of technology, maybe it's a point of finance, maybe it's an opportunity with this monopoly moment that Jen spoke of so eloquently, in terms of how things might change, but they might not necessarily have the funding in order to be able to research that fully. So what our students do is take that on board. They go off and ferret away and do research for the best part of 4 months, and then produce a piece of work which gives them their final master's degree, but also gives them the opportunity to share that information with the company in question, who can then use that as free consultancy without obligation or anything like that at all. And obviously that's a win-win for universities, it's a win-win for the student, and hopefully the firm in question gets that free consultancy and hopefully that original insight as well. And if anyone's keen to explore that further, please just do drop me an email. I'm always happy to engage with the businesses in question.
Thank you, Gavin. I've got one more question coming from the audience, which is probably, I'm going to look to all three of you for your response. But what sectors do the panel feel will be instrumental in driving inclusive economic and social growth agendas here on in? And I'm going to start with Jen.
I knew you were going to start with me then, Steve. I think all sectors need to drive that forward. Service sectors like accountancy firms are already doing that and should continue to do that. So the Social Mobility Foundation create an index, and it looks at employers and how well they are being inclusive as a business. KPMG was second in that, and it was another accountancy firm who came first. And I think the top three were accountancy firms actually. So service firms are leading the way. And I think other businesses should look to those to follow. Thank
you, Jen. Gavin?
Yeah, apologies for there's a chat with a leaf blower outside, so I'm sorry about any noise interference. But yeah, probably similar to Jen, really. I don't think it's something that you would necessarily pin on one or more individual sectors, and it would be more of a broader aspiration. And I think the evidence does show that, regardless of your starting point, whether you're currently particularly proactive in the area of inclusivity or not, there's always gains to be had. And those gains can obviously be measured not just in terms of profitability, but also in terms of pure morality, in terms of doing the right thing and also helping your local economy. Obviously, from my perspective in the world of tech, there's particular drives in terms of gender balance and making sure that kind of gender diversity is there. That's been a problem in many tech areas historically, and there's many initiatives happening at a local and international level to try and balance that up.
Right, thanks, Gavin. And Mark, from the public sector?
Couple of points before I start on that answer, if that's okay. I see that Alison's come back in the chat and talked about support for established businesses as well, and I just want to recognise that and say it's a really good point. I think you're right, Alison. So we've got some funding routes for established businesses, but we've got lots and lots as well about working practices and decent work and quality of life that I think is relevant there. Second thing, just to knit this all together, is Ian Logan's point in the questions and answers, which is that the Growth Platform does have a really good employer to school connection service. So if you are interested as a business in reaching out into school children, then please do be in touch, because it's worthwhile. There's really, really strong evidence for contact at school age leading to awareness and interest. And Jenny, you were talking about that directly, then going on to aspiration and success. So please do reach out if you can.
Right, thank you.
I can give you a sort of an economic answer. What's going to be important? Obviously, the port. You know, the port continues to grow. The port is now west-facing in a post-Brexit environment and will become more important. So you've got all this port activity, you've got maritime activity. You might have the tidal barrage coming in on top of that if all goes well, and then the associated logistics. So I think we'd be well reminded here to say that it's not just tech and it's not just 21st century industries that will create jobs. There are other bits of the economy that remain really important. But I know the person who asked that question is the absolutely brilliant Matt Johnson, who runs Form, who runs a program at the moment in the City Region about sustaining and growing and making more resilient our fastest growing businesses. And they're businesses in many sectors, but they're tech enabled. So I think rather than saying tech businesses, I think we've got this tech enabled theme that will come through because it applies as much to infectious diseases control and public health data science as it does to digital marketing. So I'd give that as a theme, I think.
Yeah, okay, thanks, Mark. In a couple of minutes, just before we close, one of my colleagues is going to put up a question poll, which we'd like all members of the audience to respond to. And Gavin will use the output of that poll for some of the research work he's doing. And we'll include the feedback on that along with the detailed questions that we haven't got to during this session. But I personally have just been taken by one comment that's come up on the Q&A poll, which is it's a law firm introducing more flexible and remote working. And one thing that really shone through during the last 12 months is how well the team have responded to being trusted to work independently, and how in many areas productivity has improved substantially and people have a better work-life balance. Now, that's part of what Jen's been talking about. It's part of the social economic, pulling together, because these people, once people get work and once people are able to demonstrate their value to a business, I think that asset value increases within the business. And it's we used to call it many years ago emotional capital. Well, it's intrinsic within a business now, and you can't put a value on it. And that more and more is what business executives are going to be searching for as we get to the future. Can I ask Carolyn to put the poll up for the audience? And while those logistics take place, I'm going to summarize where I think today's session has been well received by you guys. It's a while since I've seen so many questions in a webinar, which is great. I think it serves testament to the quality of the presentation from each of the three speakers. And you have a personal thanks and a group thanks to each of you for what you've done today. The recording will be sent to everybody afterwards, but if you have any follow-up questions about the session, please submit them to info@growthplatform.org, which is spelt the way I've said it. Please do keep an eye on the Growth Platform and ULMS website for future events, and sign up to the Growth Platform and PBS newsletters and follow them on social media. And that's the end of the direct marketing piece. But a final thank you goes to Claire Delahunty and Carolyn Knott from the Growth Platform, without whose help this wouldn't have taken place, and also to Anne Donnelly and John Green from the ULMS. I think, you guys behind the scenes, these things don't happen overnight. You've put a lot of work in, and the value is seen through the feedback that we're getting. Thanks to everyone for participating. Just remains for me to say, stay safe, everybody, and hopefully we'll see you soon. Thank you very much, and bye-bye.
Thanks all.
Thank you, bye.
All the best.